Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bible Illustrated video. This is something that I intended to record for my secondary channel, Orthodox Boyan, but because of the gravity of the situation and the absolute need to raise some awareness, I decided to post it on here on the main channel. And today I'm joined by Isaac. He is my friend from the United States. He is of Palestinian origin, and you might as well assume what tone this episode will take. And his family is actually from Jerusalem, so he has a lot of insider knowledge of what is actually going on in the ground as regards, to the latest attacks in the Gaza Strip and so on. So for all of you who have been living under a rock, and there are such people, like even a couple of days ago, I had to explain to a friend of mine what happened. Hamas attacked a music festival in Israel, and they attacked a number of kibbutzes on the edge between Gaza Strip and the rest of Israel. They kidnapped a lot of people and killed, again, a lot of people. The people that they killed include, of course, children and babies. And this also is the first time we actually encounter a big recurring theme of this video, which is the fog of war, our inability to know the truth of the most horrible claims that are made, sadly, by both sides. And this is not just both sides, but there are a lot of stakeholders here, and so on and so forth. I think that's it for the introduction. Actually, no, the Israel retaliated. So they essentially cut off all the power, food, water, medicine from the Gaza Strip, which is called the world's largest open-air prison because it houses around 1 million people on, what's the surface area?
2 million people.
2 million people. Okay,
2.2 million people in 365 square kilometers.
Okay. Well, Israel, ensured that number is sadly lower now, and they essentially cut off these people from their daily necessities. And if you know anything about Gaza Strip, you probably know that it's not really a vibrant economic community. So you can imagine just how horrible doing this to civilians actually is. I will start off this. So that's the introduction. So first, regarding the attack on the Baptist hospital, this is a hospital that treats people, from what I know, free of charge, and it is actually owned by the Anglican Communion. There has been a lot of talk who actually bombarded it. So can you tell us what do you think happened, some of your impressions?
So from the video I've seen,
Yeah.
of the actual strike,
Mhm.
there's a 20-second video on X of the actual strike. And then there are other videos of Hamas rocket launchers. And then there's also videos of flares up in the sky that seem to indicate an Israeli warplane. My understanding from everything I've seen indicates this. At the same time that Hamas was firing a barrage of rockets into Israel, an Israeli warplane dropped.
Just speak that louder.
An Israeli warplane dropped a missile with an airburst fuse.
Okay.
So before it hit the ground,
Okay.
it burst in the air.
Okay.
And it was aimed at the parking lot, and it killed 471 people, as far as I understand. This is what the evidence seems to suggest.
Okay. This is also something that sadly people have to do, and that is seek out their own information. With, again, this can be faulty. So I just want to emphasize that we are not making any absolute statements, because we can't. You have nicely said this is what it seems to you. I must say that there are a lot of people who defend Israel, and there seems to be this false dichotomy that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semite, you're a Nazi, and all of this trite nonsense. because I don't think that anyone is above criticism, anything is above reproach. If I, for example, criticize a priest, I'm not against God, or not, I don't even wish any harm for the priest. I simply am emphasizing a flaw that I think needs to be corrected, not that I generally do that. But the way, this is something I want to say as regards to both the church bombing and the hospital bombing. Even if this wasn't Israel's doing, the way they treat people, again, by cutting off their daily necessities, is absolutely ghoulish. It's a war crime. So I'll give you a little anecdote. The president of Serbia once said that a lot of Serbian women are getting pregnant on purpose, so they would go on maternity leave and not work, because Serbia has a very generous maternity leave, and like 2 months, I think, or even more. Uh, Immediately when this rumor started going around, he went on air and said, "I never said that. Never, never. There's not a recording. I never said anything similar." Now, I honestly believe him, and this is one of the very few occasions where I do believe our president. However, he's the kind of person for whom you would immediately believe that he said something like that. And that is similar to what Israel is doing. In the end, it does not really matter uh, uh, who bombed either the hospital or the church, because on one hand, we have a terrorist organization, Hamas, and on the other hand, we have IDF, Israel Defense Force, who, well, they're not really into conventions and rules of warfare and so on. Even though, of course, they like to present themselves like that, and of course, they have their online fighting force of people who accuse anyone who showcases these crimes as anti-Semites and Nazis and so on. As regards to the church, do you want to add anything about the hospital?
The only thing I have to add is just, again, the evidence strongly suggests that it was a JDAM missile by Israel.
Okay. Again, I have no clue. I don't know anything about weapons. I know medieval weaponry, but this I do not know. As regards to the church, there was news a week ago, that the church of Saint Porphyrios of Gaza, which is located in the Gaza Strip, was actually bombed, and this turned out to be fake news. But does not what isn't fake news is that the church premises were bombed, 2 church halls were hit and destroyed. And while it seems that the church itself, the temple, did not suffer any damage, that does not, those 2 buildings were leveled, and sadly they were housing refugees. I do not know how many people have actually died there. They're still collecting bodies. I have seen some preliminary list of people that were identified. It contains some 20 names. And I honestly believe that these people, well, Christian ones, are martyrs. Yeah. And I think that, whoever strikes an altar of God cannot hope to prosper. I do not know, again, I do not know who did this, but I must say that some statements by Israel, in this case particularly, it's similar to those videos of a guilty dog. You have 2 dogs, one of them is destroyed a pillow on the couch, and you immediately know which one was it, even if you don't know. Some of the statements by Israel officials were, no, it wasn't the church, it was just 2 random buildings. You're really defending that, you're really downplaying that bombing for someone who supposedly hasn't done it. And there were a couple of similar statements. Please give me some of your views as regards to this.
It's incredibly obvious that Israel hit this church.
Okay.
For everyone should know that Hamas does not have the kind of weaponry to level buildings like that. If you've ever seen the Al-Aqsa rockets, if you've ever seen them in action, you can see video of them hitting targets and striking targets. These are very comparatively speaking, low yield weapons.
Okay.
They don't have the capability to level buildings like that.
Okay.
Israel hit this. All the evidence suggests this, both in terms of the aftermath and I have been told, though I cannot confirm, I have not seen, that there is video of the church halls being hit.
Oh, okay.
It was 18 people that died.
Mm.
I think it was 8 children that died.
Yeah, I've actually seen a dead baby.
And there were, if I'm correct, it was 8 children.
Yeah.
And the Archbishop Alexios had the funeral memorial rites done earlier today. And 18 dead, at least 100 wounded that I can tell.
Yeah.
And they are still trying to pull bodies from the rubble.
Yeah, God knows what the death toll will be.
Yes.
And hopefully it's the last death toll. I'm not hopeful, but I'm hoping and praying.
Well,
yeah.
God willing. This was when I first heard this, there was something in the back of my mind that was telling me, I'm hoping that this is just fake news again. Because I remember when the first rumor came out that the church was destroyed, I was distraught. I was at work, and I just for the rest of the day I just couldn't focus at work until luckily the Facebook page of St. Porphyrios came out with a statement saying that the church was fine, it had received no damage, and they were taking in refugees.
Yeah.
But when I saw this, it just
and speaking of those refugees, because there have been talks, I mean that it's not talks, there were like orders by Israel for all of the people at the Gaza Strip to move southward because they planned bombing operations of the north of Gaza. Now, again, these are people who have been cut off from food, water, and electricity, and medicine. And cutting electricity, I can sort of understand, but food, water, and medicine, I know that for me is just a small what is called holdomor. Yeah, the masturbation of what's it, Ukrainians and the
kulaks.
Kulaks, yeah, during the Soviet Union. And I don't know in which world this is fine, but there were a lot of talks of, well, why doesn't Egypt simply take all of those refugees?
So to get to the calling for people from northern Gaza to evacuate to southern Gaza, you have to understand that the whole Gaza Strip is only somewhat larger than the American capital of Washington, D.C. To ask 1.1 million people to move from the northern part to the southern part to evacuate properly is logistically impossible. There's also the fact that there are hospitals there that simply cannot evacuate many of their patients. Many of them are in ventilators, intubators, they are in incubators, they are young children, they are elderly people, they are people severely wounded that to move them is a death sentence. And they cannot move them and they cannot evacuate, especially because many of these doctors refuse to outright because they do not want to abandon both the injured already in the hospital and anyone that may be coming through.
But that's also martyrdom, those doctors. And, sainthood shines during, like, for example, these doctors who don't want to leave their patients. Then Archbishop Alexios, who said that he won't leave his church until the very last refugee has left the premises. Then there's, I think, a Catholic cardinal who said that he was willing to exchange himself for the hostage children. These are literally stories that we see in the lives of the saints. And when you read them, they seem so far away. But when we have such extreme events like this, well, pointless war, but then again, which war does have a point? You see this true humanity shining through, and I just want to comment why doesn't just Egypt let them in? I want to share Serbian experience because during the Operation Storm in Croatia, which was essentially an ethnic cleansing operation, Serbia was flooded by refugees that were Serbs. And to be quite honest, from what I hear, we did not prove ourselves before God with those refugees, because we looked them with disdain. I heard that there were people going through the refugee convoys selling water at these exorbitant prices, and these refugees, there were, I don't know, there were camps of these refugees well into like 2015, for example. And these were like, I don't know, 100,000, 200,000 people. Now imagine a million people coming into a country such as Egypt, and ask yourself, does your organization, does your employer have enough money? And generally you will think that you do not have enough your money, that your organization or employer is underfunded. Now, imagine what happens when a country that's underfunded, for example, Egypt, because they're not really known to be a rich country, suddenly gets an influx of like 1 million refugees. And in Egypt, it's like Copts and Arabs, and these are Palestinians.
Well, the way it works is the big problem is the fact is that Egypt can't afford to take them in. We're talking about the possibility of not just 1 million, but 2.2 million.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep
2.2 million Gazans going into the Sinai Desert. 30+% of the Egyptian population lives in extreme poverty.
Yeah.
The government is, to be quite frank, somewhat incompetent, and the country is just economically hanging by a thread in many ways. Egypt can't handle them. There's also the fact that Egypt currently is dealing with two conflicts. There is a civil war in Sudan that they are worried about will spread across the border. And there's also the fact that they still have to deal with radical Muslim militants, ISIS and ISIS-related groups in the Sinai that already attack the Copts of the Sinai. And the fact of the matter is that 2.2 million Gazans who are exhausted, tired, weary, angry, hurt, are easy pickings for recruits.
Yes.
And it will create.
Oh yeah, that didn't even occur to me.
And even then, the fact is where will they go? Well, they'll probably just stay in a very inhospitable area, the Sinai Desert, and UN mandated tent camps, and a lot more people will die. Egypt can't afford. None of the Middle Eastern countries right now are capable of taking them. A lot of them have.
I don't think any country can like accept 2 million people just like that.
A lot of it's called Lebanon, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan specifically have taken in hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Palestinians, not just from 1948, but from 1967. In fact, 60% of Jordan's population is Palestinian.
Yeah,
and these countries, like Lebanon's economy is in shambles and the government barely functions.
Yeah.
Jordan has a strong central government, but the economy is like they just can't afford to take him. It'll cause a great deal of chaos. What a lot of people are afraid of in Lebanon is that if Lebanon takes them, it'll start another Lebanese civil war, and nobody wants to fight another 15-year civil war. Nobody can take them. But then there's also just the fact that none of these people want to leave anyway.
Yeah.
They don't want to leave anyway because there's been a lot of talk of, oh, well, the Gazans will leave. They'll go to Egypt. They'll go to Jordan. But then we'll get rid of Hamas. We'll rebuild Gaza and we'll let them come back. They've been told this story twice. In 1948, when Israel was founded, the Erdogan, the Haganah, and a bunch of other paramilitary organizations came in. They killed 15,000 Palestinians. They expelled 750,000 more, put them in refugee camps in Palestine, in what would later become Israel, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Egypt, and told them, in a couple of weeks, you'll all be able to come back. None of them have ever been able to come back. In 1967, when Israel launched a preemptive strike against its neighbors and annexed the West Bank and next to both the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula. They expelled even more people from the West Bank into Jordan and told them within a couple weeks you'll all be able to come back. Not only were they not allowed to come back, that is when Israel began building settlements in the West Bank
Yeah.
on the land and on the properties of Palestinians.
I think that's still condemned by the United Nations.
So it's not only condemned by the United Nations. Technically, it is still, as I understand it, American policy that they view the settlements in the West Bank as illegal.
which they are.
That's U.S. That is official U.S. State Department policy.
Which is ironic considering what a big ally the United States is towards Israel. But I'm so glad that they're not turning a blind eye to this.
The fact of the matter is that the Gazans know better. The Gazans don't want to leave because they know if they leave, they'll never come back. They'll never come back, and they want to stay home.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be asked to leave. Frankly speaking, if Israel is so humanitarian, if Israel cares so much, they'll let the Gazan refugees and the Gazan women and children into Israel. I mean, a lot of it is their land to be, well, it was ancestry, their land to begin with.
Yeah, and I agree with that, but sadly, I do not see it happening. And I wanted to comment something that that is very prevalent whenever a conflict such as this erupts. And I myself have no stakes here. To my knowledge, I'm completely unrelated to any Palestinian or Jew. However, there is this undercurrent, especially prevalent among American evangelicals, who seem, for some reason or another, to consider Jews closer to them in faith than the Jews. I do not know why would someone opt to consider someone who rejects the Son of God to be closer in faith than a Christian. For me, that is complete insanity. I think you have seen it. Okay, this might be an outlier, but it sort of speaks what I'm trying to say. Somebody posted a photo of an Orthodox church somewhere in Israel, and their comment was, they don't seem to me to be Christians at all, but idolaters.
That particular tweet was actually from the church in Gaza.
No, they didn't post it. Yeah, the image.
The picture. The image was from the church in Gaza.
Yeah, and this I found absolutely insane. And what I find even more, same level insane, is this evangelical obsession to somehow usher the end times by supporting Israel in anything, including in persecution of other Christians. Every year there's some major Christian festival or holiday that they can hold, and we all know about that horrible custom of ultra-Orthodox Jews, not ordinary Jews. I have normal Jews as friends who like spit at Christian processions and so on. Can you expedite the end times? I do not know.
Well, what a lot of that has to do is this. So a lot of this, in my opinion, at least part of it, has to do not just with evangelicals in the end times and also with Hamas. So I want to start in talking about Hamas.
Okay.
It has to be understood that Hamas was created by Israel. Hamas, let's call it
irony.
The Mossad officials and Israeli high cabinet members and IDF officers have spoken in the past about how Hamas was created by Israel in 1988, specifically to dilute the power of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was the militant wing of Fatah, which was the political party that up until 2005 ruled both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now they only rule the West Bank.
By the way, is this official, or
it's not officially been recognized, but many IDF and IDF officers and Mossad agents and Mossad officials have spoken about this.
Okay.
It was created because at the time there was a beginning level of frustration with Fatah, with Yasser Arafat, and Israel saw an opportunity to exploit those frustrations and split Palestinian political power in half.
Okay.
Hamas is an Islamo-nationalist political organization.
Mm-hmm.
They rule Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
Hamas is actually Hamas is funded by Qatar. It's not
Okay.
funded by Iran, though
Okay.
some Iranian weapons do get smuggled in through Gaza. It's
Okay.
Hezbollah that's funded by Iran, but
Okay.
Hamas is funded by Qatar. Hamas has received well over, I think, close to $1.5 billion from Qatar. And in fact, Benjamin Netanyahu was very aware that Qatar was funding Hamas, and he allowed it to continue, thinking that he could control Hamas. Because again, Hamas was created not just to split Palestinian political power and weaken it,
Okay.
but to give Israel a justification, an excuse for the acts of violence they commit against Palestinians both in the West Bank and in Gaza.
Okay.
Netanyahu's assumption seems to have been, I will let Hamas continue to grow. I will let them have their rockets. I'll let them fire their rockets. We'll bomb them back. He thought that he could control Hamas and just let it idly stand by. That wasn't going to be the case because
that's a bit naive. I mean,
it has to understand the reason why Hamas launched the attack that they did, which was horrific and terrible. It was not a random attack. It was spurred by a particular set of events that have happened in the past few weeks.
Okay.
That was the spark that lit a gunpowder casket of 15 years worth of just abuse and brutalization.
Okay.
And that spark was the Al-Aqsa complex.
Yeah.
So the Temple Mount, right, is host to the Western Wall. Is
that the Wailing Wall?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The Wailing Wall. Qubbat al-Sakhra, Dome of the Rock, which is the oldest Islamic structure in the world, and Al-Aqsa Masjid.
Yeah.
Now, Dome of the Rock is the second holiest site.
Yeah.
And Al-Aqsa Masjid is the third holiest site.
Okay.
Now, there is a group of people called the Temple Institute. And the Temple Institute is a group of Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews that are trying to make the Messiah happen.
By the way, because I'm illustrating, the Bible verses, I often use their imagery to help me illustrate the Exodus description of the tabernacle. And now, when you mention it, you know about them. I mean, I know that they're trying some shenanigans with the temple.
So. They've been trying it for years. They've had help from certain evangelical groups. Specifically, what they're trying to do is that they have found a group of people that they can trace their lineage back to the tribe of Levi.
Okay.
They have
the clergy.
Yeah, they're prepping them to teach them how to do the clerical rites. They have in the past attempted to sacrifice goats on the Temple Mount. And more specifically, what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring about a red heifer, a red cow.
Yeah.
That they believe if they properly sacrifice and burn will help bring about the Messiah. As my understanding is, and if I could be wrong, my understanding is they sacrifice the heifer, they burn it, and the ashes will play a role in purity for the priests to help them touch in touching and dealing with corpses. They have claimed that they have found that they've been able to engineer 5 cows that are spotless, no blemishes, and they've never worked either. These are cows that have never worked, and these are cows with no blemishes, pure red hair, not even a single black or gray or white hair.
Wow.
Pure red heifers. My understanding is that these cows were bred from an evangelical who owns a ranch, I think in the Midwest somewhere, and they brought them.
Good job, Mr. Evangelical.
And they brought them over. And what happened essentially is that, especially in the past year, these ultra-Orthodox Jews have stormed Al-Aqsa Masjid, and they have desecrated it in many ways. At least in the eyes of the Muslims, they've desecrated it. And and specifically, there was an event a couple weeks ago that led to that ultimately just led to.
I know there were some clashes right before the attack. I just remembered.
There were clashes on Al-Aqsa Masjid, and ultimately that's why the Hamas operation was called Al-Aqsa flood. In the same way that the ultra-Orthodox Jews flooded Al-Aqsa, they were going to flood Al-Aqsa and take it back. So this is the way I describe it is the reason why people ask me, why did Hamas do this? Imagine that you own a dog. And you beat it and you kick it and you starve it and you barely feed it, you treat it horrendously, and then eventually, after years and years and years and years of abuse, the dog has had enough, and even though it knows it's probably going to die, it bites back at you.
Okay.
What did you expect? Like, this is the thing, is like Israel never had any real plan as to how to deal with Hamas.
Okay.
Right? They created Hamas thinking that they could split I think they created Hamas thinking that they could split Palestinian power, give an excuse for the atrocities they commit, and they thought that eventually they could deal with Hamas down the line. But what they didn't understand is that Hamas's popularity within Gazans and even in the West Bank had grown and grown and grown so much, and Hamas had been, and they never, I think, really understood how much money Hamas would be funded by outside organizations, that it spiraled out of control. And then, of course, Netanyahu allowing Qatar to continuously fund Hamas. And because, again, it's Qatar, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is what is funded by Iran, right?
Okay.
Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which are two separate but allied organizations from Hamas. They're both in the Gaza Strip.
I can barely keep track of all of these Islamic organizations.
There are about 24. It's called between both West Bank and Gaza Strip. And of course, Hezbollah. So it's Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah that's funded by Iran. The fact of the matter is, it's gotten out of control. And the fact of the matter is that Israel never had a real plan as to how they were going to deal with the Gaza Strip. I think they were hoping that they would be able to just indefinitely maintain Gaza as it is and just keep people living in a prison, and they would never have to think about it. There was no real long-term strategy.
Yeah.
And now what has happened is that Hamas has proven itself more powerful than the IDF in many ways. Hamas's rockets have and are continuously still overwhelming their Iron Dome anti-missile systems. And once those run out, because Iron Dome was not created or built by Israel, it was created and built by America, and the Americans supply Israel with the Iron Dome missiles. Once those run out, Israel's kind of a sitting duck.
Okay.
The Israelis keep talking about a ground invasion, but they constantly and consistently have been delaying the invasions for the silliest of reasons, primarily
because of the rain.
Because they know they can't go in. For some of the Russian watchers who are old enough to remember this, you have to understand that Gaza is a city with 40,000 Hamas fighters. It is booby-trapped in the sense that they are prepared for this. They have underground tunnels and underground bunkers. So whenever Israel tells you that they're bombing Hamas targets, you know they're full of crap, because Hamas's weapons are not in the basement of some residential complex or some hospital. Hamas's weapons, Hamas's food, Hamas's water, their supplies, they're in bunkers 30, 40, 50, 60 meters underground. You know, they don't need to hide stuff under residential buildings anymore.
Anymore, but still.
They used to, I mean, they used to in the past, but by the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that for every one building that Hamas held weapons, even if they held weapons in the building, it doesn't give you an excuse to kill 100, 200 civilians at a go like that.
But it's worth it. It's not. I mean,
but for those who are historically and military minded, and especially for some of the
I'm not. I learned about the Gaza Strip. I knew it existed, but what it specifically was, I learned like in the past month. But honestly,
but specifically for I think our Russian viewers, if Israel invades Gaza, it'll be like the Battle of Grozny in 1995, but
Yikes,
worse,
yikes,
worse,
yikes.
worse.
I know that much.
We are talking about the Russians lost close to 5,000 men in 4 months. We're talking about the IDF, which is frankly not particularly trained. We're talking about 19, 20, 21-year-old reservists who have spent their times harassing and shooting and beating up unarmed women and children in the West Bank. They are not trained for urban warfare, which is nasty and brutal and nightmarish. 5,000 in 4 months is what the Russians lost. 5,000 is what Israel will lose in 4 weeks.
Okay.
The Israelis know. The Israelis also know that if they invade Gaza, Hezbollah will attack from the north. And the fact of the matter is that the northern border, frankly, has not, at least on Israel's part, has not been properly prepared for such an invasion. And Hezbollah has 100,000 well-trained soldiers. They have well over 150,000 rockets and missiles, including anti-ship missiles, that while certainly they're not the latest and greatest, if you fire enough of them at at least one of the two carriers that the Americans have brought within 50 kilometers of the Israeli coastline, you'll do at least some damage. The Hezbollah even has tanks. Okay. They have a fleet of T-55s and T-72s, but they don't want to use them because they are concerned about the Israeli Air Force. But here's the thing: Hezbollah also has man pads and anti-air SAM systems. Israel is not prepared for this, and especially if as the humanitarian situation gets worse, because they keep delaying the aid that the Egyptians want to bring in. They keep they're not letting it come in. They're delaying it coming in. There is a real and serious reason. And especially if they try to force the Egyptians to take the Gazans, the Egyptians will actually, as I understand it, the Egyptians have at least a few divisions mobilized and on standby in the Sinai Desert in preparation. The Syrians have mobilized their 4th Armored Division and 7th Infantry Division near the Golan Heights. If this gets worse, and if this turns into the genocide, so this is a genocide, so I generally don't like to hop on trends, but I think that this is important that people understand it. If you ever speak about this, and if you ever speak in support of the Palestinians, please, whenever you're on Facebook or on X, if you could use the hashtag Gaza genocide, and the more you tweet that or post that and repost that, the more awareness you bring to the situation. The countries will invade. Israel right now is at the weakest position it's ever had since probably 1967 or 1973. The Gulf states will no longer normalize. They were trying to do a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. That's gone. The Israeli embassies have been forced to evacuate from all of the neighboring countries, even in Turkey. The Turks usually don't really care that much, but the Turks forced, I think, both the Israeli embassy to evacuate, and even a whole host of Turkish people were protesting in front of an American military base in Turkey. The Lebanese protesters destroyed the Israeli embassy. Thousands, especially after the hospital strike, thousands of men in Lebanon, in Beirut, were marching down the streets of Beirut demanding that Hezbollah. I have to say this. I am an Arab. I'm an Arab American. I was actually born a Muslim. I converted to Orthodoxy 10 years ago. I remember 9/11. I remember the invasion of Iraq. I remember the so-called Arab Spring. I have never seen not just the Arab world, but the Muslim world this angry. I have never seen literal millions of people from Marrakesh, Morocco, to Baghdad, to Indonesia, and Pakistan, and everywhere in between, and of course in America and Europe as well, protesting and just showing such anger and such overt protest or violence against American and Israeli embassies in their respective nations. I've never seen anything like this. I think the last time any kind of Arab anger and unity happened was when they all united to just, to fight against the Ottoman Empire, like 1917, 1918. It's never happened like this before.
Yeah.
It's actually quite shocking. The God, this will turn into a regional conflict, and the Israelis are paralyzed because Netanyahu can't just sit on his laurels indefinitely, because 80% because Israel's actually in a very politically unstable position, because Netanyahu's unpopular. There have been anti-government protests happening in Israel for the past year. For the past year, the judicial reforms and allegations of corruption. People are incredibly frustrated with Netanyahu. There is also issues people take with some of the members of his government, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is a radical Zionist. He was part of a currently banned political movement known as the Kahanists, that were ultra violent, actually violence. At least one member of the Kahanists, Baruch Goldstein, in 1994, went into a mosque in Hebron and killed nearly 30 people with a rifle. Guys like Smotrich, who's a finance minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the minister for national security, and who has actually been distributing rifles to settlers in the West Bank, and the settlers have been committing violence against people in the West Bank, killing over 60 people so far since this whole fiasco started. Netanyahu's blamed for this because they feel that Netanyahu failed to protect Israel, and especially to protect the kibbutzes and settlements on the border with Gaza. So Netanyahu can't attack. Netanyahu is sort of politically has to attack. But at the same time, strategically and tactically, he can't, because like the IDF will be slaughtered in Gaza. Slaughtered. We're talking about 20-year-old kids with no real experience and no real training besides being security guards for settlers in the West Bank. And he also, again, because he can't attack, because he will have to deal with Hezbollah on the northern border. And there's again the possibility of Syria and Egypt being involved if he attacks from the south. So if he attacks Gaza. Right now, what he's hoping to do, and I'll be quite frank, is that he's hoping that he can keep delaying and stalling and delaying, and basically hoping that he can starve the Gaza population to death.
Well,
I mean, President Putin was right when he compared it to the siege of Leningrad. It's basically the same thing that he's doing. It's the siege of Leningrad, but in a much smaller, more concentrated area. And he's hoping he can get away with that, and then maybe they can go in and deal with Hamas. It's part of the reason why Anthony Blinken has been the American Secretary of State, has been making so many trips to all the Middle Eastern and Gulf countries, basically asking them, how many can you take? Going to Qatar, can you take 100,000 Palestinians? Going to Jordan, can you take maybe 50,000? Going to Egypt, can you take like a couple 100,000? Because eventually they're going to try to break out. Especially like if they start like starving, people are going to start being like desperate. And all sorts of terrible things will happen. Right? I mean, I'm not wholly sure what their end game is. I don't think they have an end game. I don't think they know what they're doing. Like there is no like this whole situation has been a massive disaster and fiasco for them. And the current leadership is just paralyzed.
I think honestly, because that saying eye for an eye makes the world go blind. I think that this circle of hate will simply continue endlessly until either one side exterminates the other, or both sides accept Christianity, or at least one side, which again, let's be honest, neither Judaism nor Islam are particularly famous for being forgiving. And I think that Christian response to this was exemplary. Honestly, the way Christians act there, despite of all of the abuse they suffer, is simply stunning. I think that
the response by Antioch,
the
Serbs, the Russians, has been exemplary. Antioch and Jerusalem actually just recently restored communion with each other in the hopes that they can help each other during this fiasco. I will say, and I'll be incredibly honest, the response by Patriarch Bartholomew and Archbishop Epiphanius has been, to be quite frank, a betrayal. The only response up until the bombing of the church was a tweet by Archbishop Epiphanius saying, "We condemn what Hamas did," making no reference to praying for the Christians in Gaza, making no reference to the slaughter of, at this point, over 1,000 Gazan children, a total 4,000 Gazans with 12,000 wounded, making no reference to the indecency and the inhumanity and, frankly, the Satanism that is the collective punishment of the Gazan people, trying to starve them to death. And it is, frankly, not even, it's called not even making any real reference to Patriarch Theophilus's call for a day of fasting and prayer on Tuesday. It is, I will be quite frank, it is, for a church that claims to be the mother church, she is not being motherly. And I would also want to say this right now, especially for all the claims that Constantinople makes of being the mother church, it is in Jerusalem where the church started. It is in Jerusalem where the Holy Spirit descended upon the apostles and Pentecost began. That is where the church started. It is in Antioch where they were first called Christians. Jerusalem is the mother church, and Antioch is her sister. And it is by the grace and benevolence that Jerusalem and Antioch and Alexandria and Rome gave Constantinople the title of first among equals. It was a title they allowed Constantinople to have. They allowed the Archbishop of Constantinople to king himself patriarch. If it's called, they allowed that to happen. You'll have to excuse me, but it is very important. If you wish to claim to be first among equals, you wish to claim to be the mother church. If you want to make claims for all this authority that you say you have, then maybe it's time that you use it when necessary and not simply when convenient.
Sometimes mothers become stepmothers, evil stepmothers.
How interesting it is that after well over 10 years, Constantinople made no effort to help mend the schism between Antioch and Jerusalem, but Antioch and Jerusalem did it on its own.
It happens because thankfully we have someone above looking at us. Thank you, Isaac, for coming to the channel and being part of the Bible Illustrated geopolitical series, which probably won't repeat. But thank you for giving us this very important perspective, because again, due to fog of war and again, we might as well be wrong, but our hearts are in the right place.
I just want to say one more thing to those watching. Understand that in terms of the Palestine conflict, especially those watching, obviously in America, who are very concerned with American foreign policy, I don't ask, nor would I ever ask that you become personally invested in a conflict that is thousands of miles away from you. This is my conflict and my people, and God willing, we will solve it ourselves. But for those who have invested their own time out of their own charity, for those who have wanted to spread awareness, I thank you deeply from my heart. All I truly ask is that you pray, not just simply for the Christians in Gaza and the Christians in the West Bank, but for all the Palestinians, regardless of their faith Christian or Muslim. Pray that they are safe. Pray that they come to Christ. Pray that they are not slaughtered or murdered by radical settlers in the West Bank or by the IDF in Gaza, or possibly maybe later the IDF in the West Bank, depending on how things go down. These are women and children, regardless of their faith. We all understand. We all have our gripes and our frustrations with Islam, and of course, we are not the people who watch this. We are not Muslims, and we disagree with the teachings of Islam. But we're talking about women and children here. We're talking about babies.
I know.
Pray for them in the name of God. Pray for all of them.
Amen. Thank you, Isaac, for coming.
Thank you.
Hope to see you some other time on the channel.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.